Welcome to this Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival event, and welcome to Aberystwyth. Croeso i'r digwyddiad Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival hwn, a chroeso I Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth, the cultural capital of Wales, home to Aberystwyth University and the National Library of Wales, once home to Welsh princes. The Biarritz of Wales is the jewel in the crown of Cardigan Bay's stunning coastline and home to hugely successful TV drama Hinterland. And now, the streets that have become familiar to fictional D.I. Mathias's many fans are getting ready to welcome celebrities from the worlds of crime fiction and crime drama, because Aberystwyth is home to Wales's first ever international crime fiction event, Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival. During the early May bank holiday weekend of 2022, Aber, as the town is affectionately known, will play host to a multitude of events that will offer something for every fan of crime fiction and drama. Internationally successful authors will entertain and meet readers in historic buildings. Pub quizzes will bring together authors and readers. Writing workshops, meet the agent sessions, and informal readings will help encourage and develop new writing talent. And in sparkling celebration of new Welsh talent, a champagne reception for Crime Cymru's first crime novel competition winners. This will be an Aberbank holiday weekend like no other. So, come for the crime fiction and take Cymru home in your hearts. Rydym yn edrych ymlaen yn fawr iawn at eich croesawu I Aberystwyth ac I Geredigion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Gŵyl Crime Cymru event on behalf of Crime Cymru and our festival partners, Aberystwyth Town Council. I'd like to welcome you to panel number 14 for this online festival. I'm Jacky Collins, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this event. If you've been watching this week or today, you'll know that at each panel we're featuring an independent Welsh bookshop. And this session's bookshop is Browsers in Porthmadog. If you're inspired to read any of the author's books that we mention in our discussion, please consider buying these from Browsers. And at the end of our session together, you'll be taken to the program page of the festival website, and there you'll find a click-through link on our event to the bookshop, to Browsers. We'll also be taking audience questions. We'll take those at the end, but please, if you have questions for the authors, do start writing those in the YouTube chat, and Amy Williams will be doing us the honours of gathering together your questions, and we'll take those at the end. And we'll try and get as many of those in as possible. So for our panel or session number 14, Can Setting Ever Be a Silent Character? I'm joined by two fabulous authors, Yrsa Sigurðardóttir from Iceland, and I'd like to welcome Yrsa into the session. Hi, Yrsa, so
Hi.
Good to see you. How are you?
Nice. I'm good.
Oh, this is wonderful. It's a year, more or less, since I last saw you. But how blessed we are that we've made it and we're still here. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about place and setting and things like that, but we are going to focus on your latest book that is due out, and I'll mention that in a moment. And I'm also going to ask you to do a little bit, almost like an elevator pitch of that, but no stress. Okay, just ease us gently into that. But before I do, I'm going to welcome our next author onto the panel, if that's okay with you. And so Alis Hawkins, come in, Alis Hawkins. Hello,
Hi,
Alis, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you. And I know people must keep telling you this so much, but thank you for bringing this together. I know tomorrow we're going to be in deep conversation of everything that went on behind, but it's just a magical moment to think of this connection is happening because of a seed of a thought that was dropped at some point. So wonderful. And as far as you're concerned, Alis, I don't know whether you want to tell us about the book that we can get hold of, or whether you want to tell us about the next book that's due out. But I'll leave that up to you, and I give you your moment to tell us about that, okay? But first of all, let me introduce Yrsa to our viewers. She is an award-winning, best-selling, highly acclaimed crime writer from Iceland. And as the Times Literary Supplement states, her work stands, and I quote, "comparison with the finest contemporary crime writing anywhere in the world." And seriously, viewers, if you haven't had the opportunity to begin working your way through Yrsa's series and standalones, you are in for the most awesome, criminally delicious treat. So in addition to the extremely popular Thora Guðmundsdóttir series and several fabulous standalone thrillers, Yrsa is now developing the Hulder and Freya series, and the latest book, book number 5 in the series, The Doll, is due to be released this summer. So Yrsa, I wonder, would you tell us a little bit about The Doll?
Yes, The Doll begins, or it's about a doll that comes out of the ocean into a fisherman's net and sets a ball rolling that ends with many, many deaths. And so the little girl who was on the boat when the doll originally comes into the net, her mother dies that same evening. And then the story jumps into the future when bones come into a fishing net at a similar location as the doll had come. And yes, so who owns the bones? And because people generally don't go missing here. You don't lose 2 people here without somebody asking for them, really.
Thank you. I loved the picture of, and then the number of bodies just starts to stack up. Yeah. That has drawn me in totally. And I'm going to come back and ask you again more questions about that. But I'll just introduce Alis now. So Alis is a CWA Historical Dagger shortlisted author. She's published 3 books so far in the Teifi Valley Coroner Historical Crime Series, featuring coroner Harry Probert Lloyd and his assistant John Davis. And I do believe book 4 is well on the way. Yeah. And she's also published novels set in medieval times or partly in medieval times. And because we're discussing setting, Alis, I'm going to go back and forth between these 2 historical time periods, if that's okay, to gain some knowledge on what was going on when you chose those different sites. But Alis, which book would you like to pitch to us for this session?
I think it's probably best, Jacky, if you don't mind, if I pitch the most recent in the Teifi Valley Coroner series, Those Who Know. As you say, book 4 is on the way. That's coming out in September, but this is the one that people can get hold of at the minute. But just to put it in the context of the series, because I'm nothing like as well known as Yrsa, so people probably never heard about me or my novels. So the Teifi Valley Coroner series is set in West Wales in the 1850s, and my central character, Harry Probert Lloyd, He's a young barrister who's been forced to leave London and come back to his father's estate because he's going blind. Events in the first book force him into investigating the murder of a young woman that he was once in love with, and that eventually, at the end of the book, leads to him being asked to stand in as the local coroner because the local guy is very unwell. In book 2, Harry and his assistant, who he acquired in book 1, John Davis, an ambitious solicitor's clerk, are presented with 2 suspicious deaths. But Harry manages to, he's a bit uncompromising, and his way of investigating manages to upset and alienate both the magistrates and the police. And that has a consequence in this book, Those Who Know, because he's standing for election as coroner now in his own right, the previous guy having died. And he expected to just be waved through on the nod. Oh, great, you've been doing it for a while. Yeah, here we are, you can be coroner. But no, the magistrates, who he has annoyed quite considerably, have put up their own candidate. So he has to fight an election and look into a sudden death, which happens when he's on the hustings. It looks like an accident, but Harry's medical witness, the eccentric Dr. Benton Reckitt, thinks otherwise. So Harry's trying to win votes and investigate the death at the same time. And that turns out not to be a very good idea. And both the campaign and the inquest go badly, with the result that an innocent person gets sent to trial for murder. So Harry thinks, right, better step things up a bit here. So he sends John Davis to London to follow up a lead. And the evidence that John finds is so explosive that it threatens not to just blow up the case, but to blow up the whole community. Bang, there we go. That's the pitch.
Thank you, thank you. So you have whet our appetites for these 2 novels. But before we go into depth of those, we are charged with the discussion of, can setting ever be a silent character? I have sometimes, not often, read crime novels where they could be set anywhere. It's almost like a very bland backdrop. But I wonder, for you as authors, is that how you feel about the settings that you create? So Yrsa, would you set us off on this? What does that setting as you create it, what does it mean for you?
Oh, a whole lot. It's to me, setting, sets the scene. There's no good, the atmosphere, everything has to do with the setting, I find. And I couldn't imagine writing a story and not mentioning at all where it's happening or what's, letting the environment take some part in the setup of the scenes or what you say, because I mean nature and the ambience of an area where you're, it does influence everything. Mm-hmm. And I found that, for example, I always tend to set my books in the winter time because I have a feeling that in the bright summer nothing bad can happen, which is of course not correct, but it is, I mean, it's a pillar, it's one of the pillars that makes a story or a novel would be the setting. It's like having a play on a stage with nothing on it. Mm. So this the environment, that's sort of the backdrop of what then takes place to me. That's what it feels like.
Thank you for that. Alice, for you, as you develop your story, is that, I mean, is I like the way you call it as that backdrop, if it were a play. Have you already, Alice, created that backdrop before you begin?
It's not even creating a backdrop, Jacky. It's actually, it's more fundamental than that. The stories arise out of the areas in which they're set. I feel like these stories couldn't happen anywhere else. The Teifi Valley is a very specific geographical area. It's very rural. If you go there now, it's sort of out of the way, but it also, in those days particularly, was very connected to the rest of the world because it has a coastline. And in those days, before the railways came, the coastline, the sea, was the superhighway. So although in one way it's quite isolated and it's far from everywhere, and by everywhere I think we'd probably mean England and where things happen in London, but it's also very highly connected, and it's particularly connected to places like Bristol and Liverpool and America, which becomes a factor in the second book. So it's not so much that I'm setting these novels in a backdrop, it's that I've taken that area as my location, and the stories arise very, very organically out of the landscape, out of the social constructs there, and out of the people who are formed by living in that unique area.
Thank you, thank you. So the people who are from those areas, if we just take, if location is character, but then characters interact. So Yrsa, our duo, Hulda and Freya, how much are they influenced by the landscape, do you think, by the setting?
I think everyone in Iceland is influenced by nature, by the seasons, by where we are, you know, the history, everything. I mean, that's what makes a culture, part of what makes a culture. So they are influenced, I mean, less so maybe than in the Thora books, where, I mean, the Hulda and Freya series is pretty much an urban series. Most of it takes place in Reykjavik. And in Reykjavik, obviously nature is not as big a factor as it would be if it was out in the countryside, but still there's the weather and so on I mean, nature, I'm not sure that there is a country where nature plays as big a part of society than here. I mean, just now, if I go to my driveway, I see a volcano erupting. So it's been, and we have like all the heating for the houses comes from nature. Our electricity comes from nature. So it's a really, really, really big part of everything here. Plus, of course, the ocean, with fishing having been the biggest part of our economy for the longest time, and is now about only 1/3. But and for us, I think the ocean is like, to other people in more mainland Europe, a forest would be like, people are creepy forest, creepy ocean.
Creepy ocean.
Ocean, yeah.
Creepy ocean, creepy ocean. I wonder if I might do this now. Speaking of creepy ocean,
yes.
Viewers, I don't know if you can see that, viewers, but this came with my proof copy of the book, and I haven't slept since this was delivered. Well, the book actually kept me reading long into the hours. It says that this is part of the inspiration for the doll.
It is.
Yeah. Could you tell us about this, Yrsa?
Yeah, I got some years ago, a reader in Norway who has Icelandic roots sent me that through Messenger, and said that her one of her Icelandic cousins was a captain, and that had come into the net here outside the Reykjanes Peninsula. And she said, I think he took the photo, and she said, I just know that you're going to love this photo. And I did. And I kept it for a long time, thinking, because I wanted to write, I found that it was more like a horror component to it. But then I decided against that, because I don't know, The Conjuring, Chucky, you know, it's been done so many times. So I thought, no, I'll rather use it in a crime, like straightforward, more crime novel. So that was really fun to write about. And I can show you one thing, that because that doll is on the cover of the UK edition, and I can now, what I do is I can use the cover of this book to check if countries are tough. Because if you put the picture on the cover, you're a tough country. Iceland had this, because they said it's too gross, we can't have it on. So
whoa,
they're tougher than we are.
So despite you being closer to nature and hardy individuals, Yeah, that horror. But I
There are
think
limits.
yeah, I think the problem was, Yrsa, I think you frightened the Icelandic population so much with "I remember you." I think probably they don't. Yeah, I think they don't trust you to do that kind of thing. But what a beautiful story that people who know how you write and what moves you think to send you that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you in the previous panel that I did, talking about how readers can influence the way an author develops a story or the kind of story they develop. So yeah, it's great. Thank you. Alis, now the difficulty, I would say, your added extra difficulty fact is bringing to life a place that you cannot walk by or experience in a way because of that historical aspect, and I just wonder, what do you do? What's your process for ensuring that we might be able to feel that we are treading, the Glan Teifi Valley in the 1850s? What's the...
Well, it hasn't changed that much, actually. I mean, landscape doesn't change a huge amount, obviously. I've got endless maps of the period, and I'm constantly checking, was this road there? Did this exist? Had they built, was this little village there? Because once the railways came, villages which had either not been there or had been tiny little hamlets suddenly became quite big. So I'm constantly having to check that. But I grew up, as you know, Jacky, I grew up on a farm, and that's probably been the single most useful thing to me. I grew up on a farm in the Teifi Valley, where I write about. And that has taught me things like, what does the land feel like? What does it smell like? What do the different seasons bring to the landscape? What's it like at night? I mean, one of the things about writing historical fiction is you've got no electric light. And that is a major problem for your characters, because they're constantly having to think, how are we going to see? It's very difficult to ride around or go around in a carriage at night, for instance, without external light. Constantly in the winter, like Yrsa's saying, it's much better to set things in the winter. But, from about 4:30 when you're inside, it's dark. And so my characters are constantly thinking about having to find light. But I go back a lot. My folks still there, my family still lives there. So I do go back a lot. I walk around. I drive around, because the Teifi Valley, where I set the books, it's quite a large geographical area. So I do drive around a lot. And during lockdown, I have to say, Google Maps has been absolutely spectacular, because when you do Street View, I mean, if I think, right, Harry's riding along here, he's riding up into the Preseli Mountains now, what can he see? And you can look at a map all you like, and I'm a reasonably good map reader, so I can guess. But actually, if you do a sort of 360 on Google Maps, you can see what somebody can see from that specific road. Now, then you have to remember, well, agriculture was different, so it would look a little bit different, but the hills would still be there, the rivers are still there. So it's not that difficult. And I think the best way to give people an impression that they're there is to talk about the senses. What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? So then you've got to consider, well, there were many, many more birds around in those days. So Harry's constantly listening to birdsong. Like you say, he's blind. Well, not quite blind. He can and can't see, but he certainly can't see birds. So he's constantly talking about birdsong. And I think those things, what does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does the rain feel like? I think those are the things which ground people in what your character's experiencing.
Thank you, Alis. I think, Yrsa, that reminds me, of the opening pages of the doll. What does it feel like? And you get the sense of what does it feel like to be on the sea, on the ocean. And I wonder, from the way you described Disa's experience of being in the boat, and then Hulda's experience of not being a happy chappy on the boat, I wonder if that reflected the way you feel about being out on water.
No, I like water.
Mm-hmm.
I like water, and I'm not. I don't get seasick. I worked for one summer on a ferry that went from Iceland as a as a teenager. And it went from Iceland to, I think, it went to Bremerhaven and Newcastle, I think, Jacky.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've worked on the sea, not as a fisherman, but but I have also seen a lot of people who cannot handle it and get really, really ill. So I also understand that quite well.
Yeah, it felt very real what you were describing there, and I just wondered that the queasiness. Yeah. Now, for both of you, I wanted to ask about telling the truth about a place. A little while back, I was at Hull Noir, and we were talking about setting, and the fact that what you both write brings a place to a reading public. And because it's crime, I wonder, does it give that place a bad name? So, for example, Yrsa, I wonder, has the Icelandic Tourist Board been in touch with you and said, please, will you stop it? Because
take it down a notch, girl. No, I think no, but I do remember when I was writing my first photo novel, the first crime book I ever wrote. Then before I had finished, it was sold to, I think, 10 countries or a number of countries, and this is before Iceland became popular with tourists. And I got this really strong feeling that I had to somehow tell the readers of these countries what a fantastic country Iceland is. Come here for a visit. I was going to make them go whale watching, and then just, what am I thinking? This is not a tourist guide. This is a crime novel. And I think that all the readers realize that the crime bit is not an actual occurrence. But so I think the crime novels that are written out of Iceland are, if anything, helping tourism, because it makes you interested in a country. I read crime novels that, and I get interested in the area, even though there are horrible things going on the page. So no one has phoned me yet,
to say stop it. Yeah, but I totally agree with you. For me, crime fiction is, and even more so, I think, over the last 12 months, has been an excellent way to actually go and see places that or that you may never be able to see for one reason or another. And that, and it makes me think about, Alis, the fact that you write historical, as yet, I don't think, not unless somebody knows someone that, managed to transport ourselves back in time. And I wondered when, that idea of, is it giving the Glanteifi estate and the area a bad name? Maybe not, but I wonder what it is that you reveal. What is it that you're wanting to reveal about that time and that space?
That's a very good question, Jacky. I want people to have the impression that I'm showing them what life really was like then. Obviously, I can't genuinely know what life was like. I could research till I'm blue in the face, and sometimes I feel like I do research till I'm blue in the face. I like research a little bit too much. But I want to give people the impression that let's put it this way, this is what it might have been like. It might have felt like this to live there at that time in this particular place. And one of the reasons for writing crime is because crime gives you such a good way of telling stories about people, telling stories about the things which are important to people, telling stories about what was happening in society at the time. And one of the reasons that I didn't just write what I thought was going to be a standalone with None So Blind, because I wanted to write about a very specific thing. I won't go into that now, but if you read None So Blind, you'll know what that thing is. But I fell in love, not just with my central characters, Harry and John, but also with the melting pot, the kind of temporal melting pot, if you like, that the Teifi Valley was at the time, because it came after a period of tremendous upheaval in which farmers really absolutely rebelled against what was going on in a way that nobody knows about. Read None So Blind and you will know about it. But before the coming of the railways and the homogenization in a way of Wales into just being another part of Britain. In this time, in the 1850s, West Wales had a very, very specific feel to it. I mean, lots of people went there. It was part of the kind of grand British tour, if you like. And there's, you know, George Borrow went there, and various people wrote travel logs about going there. They found it tremendously picturesque, but they also found the people to be fascinating and not like the people, as they put it, in the rest of England. Excuse me, Wales is not part of England. But I think this is one of the things that I really fell in love with, this idea, and what I want people to know, is that Wales was tremendously different to England then. The way we treated women was different. The way we looked at society was different. The way we looked at the class system was different, and it still is. But then possibly even more so. And having said that, that's such a great place to set crime, because you've got a lot changing all at once, because you've basically got a kind of medieval / Tudor kind of agrarian farming economy rushing headlong and crashing into the Industrial Revolution and the steam age and modern life. I mean, at the beginning of the book I'm writing currently, well, I've just finished writing, we have the Great Exhibition of 1851, and you couldn't get more cutting edge and modern than that. And John, who's been to the Great Exhibition, goes back to the Teifi Valley and thinks, oh my goodness, that's what's coming down the tracks, literally coming down the tracks, actually, the railway tracks. Everything is going to change. And when you've got a society that's going through an enormous period of change and upheaval, you get a lot of uncertainty, you get a lot of people being set against each other. And that's a great time to set crime, because that's the sort of time when crimes happen. And I think it kind of reminds me a bit of now. We're in a period of enormous uncertainty now. How are we going to go forward? We are between two different eras at the minute, and we even were before COVID. You know, we are on the brink of an era that's going to be dominated by AI, in the way that they were on the brink of an era that was going to be dominated by steam and machines. And we all feel a bit uncertain, don't we? So, you know, although I'm not trying to say something about modern life, history always tells you something about modern life.
And if I can pick up on what you've just said to pass it back to Yrsa, that idea of and you know, we've said many times before that good contemporary crime fiction talks about those things that trouble us, that bother us, and I don't think I'm giving anything away to talk about that strand that talks about the drug problems in Iceland, and I just wondered to what extent does what you write about reflect reality? You know, how is that situation at the moment?
I mean, it's much better, I guess, than in many places, but we do have quite a number of homeless. And usually they are drug addicts with underlying other issues. And it's funny because I don't know how many years it's been since I wrote that book, but there's still this ongoing thing about they're trying to build little tiny houses for them and so on. And it's just now again in the news that people don't want these tiny houses in their neighborhood and so on and so on and so on. So it's still an issue. And I don't think there is any society, you know, that doesn't have drugs and drug problems. Maybe Bhutan, or you know, they won't even allow you to smoke. So, but I think that's just, you know, that's just going to be that. And nothing that I write will fix it. Nothing that banning it won't fix it. And now there's a discussion here, actually, to maybe legalize the softer drugs, but that I don't think that will fly, but increasingly there is more backup for that. Decriminalizing having drugs on you that's only for you.
Yeah, for personal use.
Yeah.
But again, the way that is woven into the story and around the doll and things, well, that's for people to find out and to enjoy. Now, the creation of space, because you both have an investigative pair, in your series, the series that you're working on at the moment. And if we were to be in the room with your investigators, what kind of atmosphere would we feel? What kind of setting would we feel that we were in? Would it be fun to be around them? Would we feel uneasy? If you put these two characters in the same space, what's it like, do you think? Yrsa, can you start?
It depends. I think it would depend on which book you're entering, because they begin by having quite an antagonistic relationship, the two of them. And then it sort of goes, it's like a roller coaster, goes up and down. It's probably at the worst place of all in the second book. And then they become kind of friends. So it's easier. I think because usually when we visit them, they are investigating crime. So I don't think they would be a barrel of laughs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they would be. I think it would be fun. I could well see myself being friends with them both. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you have them round for dinner?
I would, probably not at the same time. I'd invite them one at a time.
Okay, thank you. Alice, with these two chaps, what would it be like to be, in their company?
Very much like what Yrsa has just said. It depends where, which novel we're talking about, because one of the things that I'm doing in the Teifi Valley Coroner series is not just solving crimes, but Harry and John's relationship develops very much through the books. I mean, I'm as interested in character as I am in plot. Probably slightly more interested in character than I'm in plot, truth be told, because my plots always arise out of character. So it really does depend, on what novel you're in, but also who else is in the room. Because if Harry and John are by themselves, or with the third person in their household, Lydia Howell, oftentimes they're a little bit at cross purposes. I mean, John's always trying to rein Harry in, and Harry's always trying to break free. But put them in a situation where anybody else is trying to persuade Harry that what he wants to do isn't a good idea, or trying to circumscribe the way he investigates, because Harry is the maverick investigator of all maverick investigators. He doesn't want anybody telling him what to do. In those circumstances, John becomes hyper loyal. He will always stand up for Harry in those circumstances, which I really like. So whether I'd have them around for dinner, I think if I had them with Lydia, they'd be fine, because she kind of keeps the peace. But yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to debate. It would depend what we were talking about. I'd have to kind of steer clear of some topics of conversation, I think.
Thank you. Well, I suppose we should get a little bit dark and grim. After all, we are here to discuss crime fiction and not dinner parties. And I wanted to ask you, as women who write murder and mayhem, do you have a favourite setting? Would you rather dispatch of a body inside or outside? And why? Because, let's face it, I mean, I know this to be particularly true of Yrsa. She doesn't seem to mind. And the way that she polishes people off is extremely grim. I mean, the catalogue is vast. So it might be a little bit difficult to ask you to choose. But Alice, inside or outside for a good grisly murder?
I think in the circumstances I'm writing about, outside, definitely, because it's so much easier to make something look like an accident or even suicide if you're outside. You know, pushing people off a cliff, pushing people into the river. You know, they're falling off here, they're falling under a cart somewhere else. Whereas the scope for murdering people, unless you're going to do it in a very obvious way by stabbing them or shooting them or even strangling them, you know, yes, you can do those things outside, but you're much more likely to be found out. So I think because Harry's a coroner, not a policeman, he's often investigating suspicious deaths, but he doesn't know whether they're suicide or accident or murder or manslaughter or, you know, anything. So for me, the more scope there is for this not being a murder, the better. So yeah, for me, outside every time.
Outside for you. Yrsa, inside, outside?
Am I replying like as a murderer or as like an author?
you could actually, Yrsa, you could do both.
Both, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just let us know which persona you're being when you.
Yeah. I think if I was a murderer, I would kill somebody outside, because if you're killing inside, there's more chance of that you're leaving trace evidence, because it won't be blown away, it won't be rained upon, and so on. So definitely, I would outside. I would kill somebody outside. But I think I don't think I have a particular one or the other. You know, you can do all kinds of grim murders, both inside and outside. Definitely.
Yeah.
But can I ask one question of my own?
Yeah.
What is a Gŵyl?
Gŵyl, oh, it means festival in Welsh.
Festival.
Yeah, this is what we do in Wales. We because word order is different in Welsh and English. So Gŵyl Crime Cymru is Crime Cymru Festival. So it works. Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival. You've got the bilingual thing.
Okay, I thought it meant girl.
No, no, festival. I mean,
okay.
festival.
Yeah. I like this. These questions are very good. I think, yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. So, carrying on in the vein of places where you may have left a body, and by that I mean in novels. I'm not probing into if it's happened in real life. Of all the spaces where you've placed a body, if you were to recommend a visit to a spot, and I know it's a bit tricky if you've had bodies in lots of different places, but where a first-time visitor to either Wales or Iceland, and you wanted them to sense that place the way you'd sensed it, where would you send them and why? Yrsa, do you want to?
Yeah, I would probably send them to Gallows Rock, because that is such a, there's something about that place, because actual executions were conducted there. And so that it has like a really strange ambience to be there. And then you look over this beautiful little bay at the house of the governor, I guess it would have been called, from Denmark, and he wanted to be able to look out the window and see them when they were executing the prisoners. So, which I find like, God, why? You could have any view you want, and you want to see people being executed. That's kind of creepy. Yeah. Would have put in very thick curtains.
Yeah. Is it difficult to get there from the center?
No, not at all. It's very close to the, I mean, the president now lives in this house. Nobody's being executed there anymore, but that's the same house still. So it's, it's very close to the center, or maybe like a 10-minute drive from the center, 15 minutes.
Great, thank you. Alice, where would you send us?
I think I'd probably send you to the scene where the body is found, the first body is found at the beginning of the second book in the series, In Two Minds, which is Tresaith Beach. The area where I come from has the most gorgeous coastline. I know everybody goes on about Cornwall and Devon, and they're very lovely. Don't get me wrong, they're lovely. They're not as lovely as West Wales. The Ceredigion coastline is absolutely beautiful and still largely unspoiled. Tresaith is a little village now, but then when I set the book there, all it had, it's a beautiful little cove where ships used to come onto the beach and unload cargo, because pretty much any little beach that was sandy and didn't have rocks in those days, boats would come in, because again, like I said earlier, that was the superhighway. So at that time, all it had on the beach were 2 lime kilns and the lime kiln burner's cottage and an inn. So that was Tresailles Beach then. It's very little different now. You can still see the remains of the lime kilns. The inn is still there. It's still called the Ship Inn. And I would just love people to see the West Wales coast. Even though I set the book there, that's not my favourite beach. My favourite beach is a couple up the coast, but the West Wales coastline is beautiful. And if you want to understand what it was like in the 1850s, you really need to understand how important the sea was.
I love the link that we've got between the sea, between these 2 novels without even trying. I think that's wonderful. I am aware of the time, and as ever, lots of questions of my own, but I know we've got people watching and I know they'll have questions for you both. So let's turn to the audience questions and let's bring in the wonderful Amy Williams. Hello, Amy.
There she is.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you so much. Are you there with those questions for the authors?
So many questions. So many questions. I honestly don't think we're going to have time to get to them all. So I'll get to them quite quickly. So the first question that we have is from Avid Ava. And she says, thinking of location as a character in itself, how would you feel if your books were optioned for TV, for example, but they wanted to set them elsewhere? Should we start with you, Alice?
Do you know, that came up in the last panel with Peter James, and they were going to try and take Roy Grace from Brighton to, was it Aberdeen?
Aberdeen, yeah.
Weird. No, yeah, like I said earlier, my books totally, the plots, the characters, everything arises out of where they're set. You could not put them somewhere else. I mean, that would just do violence to the whole thing. I mean, obviously, if somebody offered me £1 million, maybe I could change my mind. But no, I mean, I just wouldn't. I wouldn't want to see that. It's so intrinsic.
I completely agree. Having read and loved all of the books.
Thank you.
What about you, Yrsa?
Same thing. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't fly. It would just seem weird. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I don't think it would work elsewhere. You know, the place in itself is a character and a really crucial character, and I think it would just give off a completely different feeling if it was, set elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. This one is from Alex, and they are asking, does setting affect the plot, or have you ever written something where the plot is defined by the setting?
Can I take this one? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I have done that actually. Yes. A book I wrote called I Remember You, which is like a ghost story, that is almost entirely defined by the setting. And I went there to go originally hiking, and I didn't even, walk 10 feet from the place because it was just so fantastically perfect for a ghost story. And that all came out of the setting. So.
Brilliant. Alice?
Interestingly, I think not entirely defined in the Tyne Valley Coroner series. No, not entirely. But one of my medieval novels, The Black and the White, which is, it takes place entirely on as it were, a pilgrimage during the Black Death. During the Black Death is raging. It's winter. And my central character is progressing from where I live now in the Forest of Dean to where I used to live in Canterbury, although I call it something else. And various deaths happen along that journey, and they could only happen on the journey because of the person he's with. So that's, yeah, in that book, to some extent in the Tyne Valley, but yeah, that in The Black and the White, definitely.
I'm going to slip in a really quick question of my own, because you mentioned The Black and the White. How was it publishing a book about a pandemic right at the beginning of a pandemic?
Everybody thought I'd done it deliberately, but of course, no, I actually wrote that book years ago. I've been looking for a publisher for a while. It was very weird. And of course, nobody wanted to read about a pandemic in a pandemic. But it was interesting in the sense that people kept saying, oh, this is just like the Black Death. And I was like, no, you have literally zero idea if you think this is like the Black Death. I mean, that was between 60 and 95%, mortality rate. Don't even think about it. Yeah, so it could have been better timed, to be honest.
Okay, the next question we have is from the Book Trail. And they would like to know, how much research do you do into the setting of your novel that doesn't actually make it into the books? Should we start with you, Yrsa?
I don't like to write. I never write about a place I haven't been to. So research into the location, usually I do at the location, and I find going there, you have to see it in 3D, even though you can get by with photos if you're forced to, and the internet. It's always much better to go to the area, see it in 3D, smell it, hear it, and also to speak to the people, because to speak to the people who are in the police station there, whatever you need for your storyline. And of course, you don't use everything. You pick out bits, and also the thing about doing research is, if you do too much, you have to really, really be careful not to start info dumping. No one is reading a crime novel to learn about. It's not a textbook. It's a story. So the trick is to figure out how much to put in that will give the book the flesh that it needs, and not too much so that it sinks. That's a trick. So never have I ever put everything that I've researched into a book.
And is it difficult then to strike that balance between just enough and too much?
No, I don't think so. No.
What about you, Alis?
I'm nodding. I would say only maybe 10% of research actually makes it to the book. Maybe less than that, maybe 5%. Because I'm not a planner, I don't know what I need before I start doing the research. So I will read widely around what was happening in the particular place, the particular place within the Teifi Valley at the time when I've set the novel. And, there are some fascinating things that were going on, and, little individual events which you can get from first-hand accounts and all this stuff. And you think, oh, that's got to go in. Oh, that's so interesting. But if it, like Yrsa is saying, if it doesn't further the plot, if it doesn't tell you something about character, then it has no place in your book, and you've just got to cut it out. I tend to put all these things in, and then on my first pass through the book, the first edit, it's just cut, because you think, it's lovely, doesn't belong.
Brilliant. The next question we have is from Asim, and he would like to know, what is your favourite thing about writing? Should we start with you, Alis?
My favourite thing about writing? Oh, gosh. Two things, I suppose. I'm not a historical novelist by accident. I love immersing myself in another time and finding out how people lived. It always reminds me of the thing that Mr. Weasley says in one of the Harry Potter books when he's talking about muggles. He says, oh gosh, they're so clever to do without magic. They're so resourceful. And I feel that people in the past were tremendously resourceful to do without electricity and machines, and all of this stuff. And that, the way people lived, watching them live in a different way, but, in the same way, if you know what I mean, that fascinates me. But I actually, on a good day, I love just putting words together and making them mean something which maybe I didn't even know before I sat down to write. Because again, I don't plan, I just go through my books with Harry and John. And I'm trying to be in Harry and John's heads because they both tell the stories. And on a day where I think, oh my goodness, I had no idea they were going to feel that, I had no idea they were going to do that, think that, and the right words come. I mean, that is just, it's so exciting. I don't know anything more exciting than that.
Brilliant. Yrsa?
I would say what I like the most, I mean, there are also like when you write something and you're really happy. But what I really enjoy is controlling everything. I can control the weather. I control what everybody says, what they do, where they go. When in real life, I can only, control what I say and do. Everything else is beyond my control. So it's easier to write a book than to live a life, for sure. Because you're the puppet master of everything.
What an interesting way of looking at it. Brilliant. The next question that we have is from Phil. And Phil would like to know, are there any writers that have been a particular inspiration to you with regards to their use of place and setting? Yrsa? I'm
sure there are. I've read so much, and yeah, I don't know. I can't name anyone, but I'm a reader. That's how I became a writer. I'm a reader at heart, and I've read so much since I learned to read that I'm not sure. I think it's like a pyramid built up of a lot of, there's so much behind what makes me in writing, that I can't really pinpoint anything in particular, really.
Alis, what about you?
I think Yrsa is absolutely right. We are the sum total of what we've read, what we've experienced, what we've done. But there is one person who I do feel I've learned something from, and that's Phil Rickman. He sets his books not far from where I live, actually, on the Welsh-English border in sort of Hereford / the old county, Powys now. And I think the way he deals with the area, with the people, with the landscape, I have taken inspiration from that. And when I was chatting with my new publisher, Canello, earlier in the year, and one of them pleased me so much when he said, "Do you know who your books remind me of?" And I went, "No." Phil Rickman. And I was just, oh my goodness, you could literally not have said anything which would please me more. So yeah, and I think his books are phenomenally badly known. They are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And hardly anybody knows about him. Do go and read Phil Rickman, everybody.
Brilliant. We have another question from Avis Ava, and she says, Alis, you've certainly whetted my appetite. Do you find that the historical setting makes for a more investigative plot, since the more straightforward environment of forensic these days gives less room for conjecture?
Oh yeah, 100%. I don't think I could write contemporary crime. All the DNA and the trace evidence and the ballistics. No, not interested. Harry and John very much do their investigations by the seat of their pants. They're using common sense, they're using knowledge of people, knowledge of the area. They're constantly arguing about what's likely and not likely to have happened. But also, I've introduced this character. No, I say introduced. A character forced himself into my books. In the second book, I was supposed to have this walk-on character of a doctor, Benton Reckitt, and he just came in and took over, and he's now a fixture in the books. He's amazing. But he is... he's a very early adopter of the science of forensics and the science of autopsy. And it's been fascinating doing the research into that. What were the early years of forensic medicine like? So yeah, the historical crime for that point of view is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it's much, much easier to write crime in years gone by, I'm sure.
Lovely. And I have to say, I have a bit of a soft spot for the Doctor. He's a little bit unusual.
Oh yeah, he's very different. He's very different. Today we call him neurodiverse. We definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yrsa, how do you manage? Do you have to do a lot of research into forensic methods when you're writing your books?
Not really anymore. I know more than I really want to know about stages of decomposition and all kinds of things. But the thing is, it is a challenge. But and there are some, the tendency to see more books written like not jumping back way back, but maybe like just 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then you are rid of cell phones, so many things that make it more complicated. But I prefer to write in a period that is exactly the period when I'm writing, and I just have to come up with ways to deal with what is present right now, because I'm sure in the future, then it will be a tendency to go back to ours, because they'll think our time is so simple and easy because we don't all have a chip, you know, where they can say exactly where you were and who you met and so on. So you know, you just have to come up with ways of using it to your advantage.
Fantastic. And we have a question from Caroline for you, Yrsa, and she's asking, do you think Icelanders have a particular feeling for the supernatural?
We definitely did. I think it's going down a lot, but Icelanders have never been very religious, and but we have had, I mean, for a westernized country, we did have more people would not maybe believe in ghosts and seances, that type of thing, but they would give it a chance, elves and all that kind of thing. But it is going down actually pretty quickly. And I think it's my generation's fault, because like when I was growing up, my grandmother would say, like, don't throw rocks because you could hit the hidden people who are there, but you can't see them. And so don't throw rocks and don't go there. That's an elf hole and all kinds of stuff. But I did not pass that on to my children. I should have. Big mistake. Can't
Maybe it's never too late. Maybe it's never too late.
I think in this instance it is.
So I'm going to be very selfish now and ask a question of my own. And Alice will know what this question is, and so will you, Jacky. It's my favourite thing to ask. I'm always on the lookout for book recommendations, and so whenever I get the chance to chat to an author, I always ask them what their desert island books would be. So if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only take 3 books with you, what would those 3 books be? I'll start with you, Alice, because I think you probably already know yours, don't you?
Well, I've been thinking. It depends whether you literally mean actually you do have to survive on a desert island. In which case, my books would be very different. I would take the Bible, because it is so many books in one, and you're never going to get to the end of it. And also, it would feed my tendency to righteous indignation, because all I'd have to do would be to read Leviticus, and I would be throwing things in the sea in sheer horror. I would also take a book of poetry, because again, that gives you so much. You know, novels, you've read them, you know. I would take one novel, actually. It would have to be a Terry Pratchett novel, just because his novels are the ones that make me laugh out loud the most. I mean, sometimes I used to read out loud to my other half, and sometimes I couldn't get to the end of a sentence because they were so funny. It would have to be one of the witch books, I think, with Nanny Og and Granny Weatherwax, who are just awesome. And I think it would probably be Carpe Jugulum, where they go after the vampires. So there you go. That's my recommendation.
And Yrsa, what would your 3 books be?
I would take a book written by my uncle about fishing nets and stuff. If I'm on an island, I want something to eat other than coconuts. And then can I take like one book and one other thing? Or do
You
I
can take whatever you'd like.
Okay, I would take a Kindle and a solar panel generator to charge it. And I'd be fine.
Smart.
And I'd be fine.
Good plan.
In all of the times that I've asked that question, that is the first time I've gotten that answer. Very smart, very smart. I think that's all the questions that we have time for. So I'm going to leave you in Jacky's capable hands and say thank you very much to the audience for asking questions, and to you both for answering them.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Amy. Thank you. Well, wonderful authors. Sadly, we're going to have to draw to a close. I really thank you for the way we have roamed around the subject matter. I feel as though we have been static in our spaces. We've wandered in some of those bleak landscapes, Yrsa, that you create, and we've even wandered back in the past. And you have me very nostalgic, Alice. My parents live not far from Tresaith, and hopefully soon. And what would be absolutely wonderful, I do hope that next year that this kind of gathering can happen in real life in Aberystwyth. I think that would be fingers crossed that we can do that. It would just be very, very special. So to all you wonderful viewers out there, thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending where you are in the world. And thank you for writing in your questions. Again, just to remind you that if anything that we've mentioned, any of the books, you'd like to buy them, do consider clicking on that programme page and looking for the link to that featured bookshop browsers in Porthmadog. But finally, on behalf of Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival online, I'd like to thank my panel, Yrsa Sigurðardóttir. Thank you so much, Yrsa. Alis Hawkins, I should say diolch yn fawr, should I not? Yeah. I wish everybody a wonderful bank holiday evening, and as we've said, hope to see you in Aberystwyth next year. Thank you and goodbye.